Okay, and
I need
to press this
to be able to share the.
Yeah, now it should be possible. I changed the security settings, so you should be freely able to share your screen.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Perfect.
Good.
I am. I know. No, let's start.
And here's Feniowski. Perfect timing. So hold on for 1 second. Feniowski is in the waiting room, joining the room now, and I'm sure he'll want to say a few words of welcome or hello. And there he is. Feniowski, welcome. We're just about to get started.
Hi, Jose María. How are you?
Hi, very well. Very well. Encantado de verte de nuevo, Feniowski. It's a great pleasure.
Igualmente, y gracias por hablar con los estudiantes. Te lo agradezco bastante. Creo que van a aprender mucho de ti. Mil gracias.
Sí, bueno. I'll try to show a lot of slides and create the desire to visit Madrid, finally to travel to the city and to walk with them in the next future.
Yeah, that's what I hope also. Let's see, but I think they're going to get a great taste from your presentation, and it's too bad that with COVID, life changes by the minute, and we were so excited about the possibility of going to Madrid. But then we had to change, and I have to thank Rick for being so flexible and accommodating. It has been a really exciting week. I don't know if Rick had mentioned you, but we had a number of very interesting discussions and conversations. So I really appreciate your time. I don't want to take any more of your time. So please start your presentation. I will shut down my video and so that you are in the forefront.
Okay, thank you very much.
All yours.
Let's start. Yes. Good morning. Is everybody connected already? Okay.
Yeah, we hear you.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. It's an honor just to share with you some ideas and some slides and some reminds about Madrid, my experience. From the very beginning of my professional career, I have been working to the city and to the urban planning, but overall base focus on Madrid many years, because the startings of my career were in the University of Madrid, in the School of Architecture, but also in the Municipality of Madrid as an architect in the planning department, finally as director of the planning department and as director of the regional planning department many years. Now I am freelance professional, and I work and research in the University of Madrid and the Polytechnic University of Madrid. But as a result of this experience, this trail of my life, I am very interested and concerned about the focus my interest in the theoretical research and practical integration in projects in different scales of the geographical and social scales. The city is, in my experience, is my base, is the place for experience, for research and learning, just with another professionals, but overall in keep contact with the people of the different cities in which we work, but overall in Madrid. I was talking before, I have been working many times in Latin America, overall in nearly all the countries, have some studies, research or projects of my studio from my colleagues, and we miss very much the impossibility to go on because of the COVID with this contact, with this close contact with Latin America. We have learned so much from the people of Latin America. We have a great depth with these countries and the people. So with the United States, in which you have been many times, and you are really fortunate to have the opportunity to live the experience of so interesting studies and so important university in New York. Well, I'll try to talk about Madrid. It's a travel around the city, beginning with the story, with the key moments, the highlights of the story of Madrid overall, from the point of view of the urban form. And finally, I'll try to describe with some order one global project we developed in Madrid in association with Juan Herreros, who is also teacher in Colombia. Was the opportunity to see, to learn, but overall to give a general view, a general proposal, a general project for the whole center of Madrid, and is the umbrella of many other smaller projects now in progress. Many of these projects behind this big umbrella are part of the conferences, the presentations you are going to listen in these days from Spanish professors. Well, let's start. Vamos a ver si. Bueno. Let's start with some figures of introduction, which you can appreciate the difference between the city center, periphery, and metropolitan area. The city center of Madrid is much smaller than the whole city and the metropolitan area. And perhaps the real city is not the city center. It's not the central almond, because the shape of this area is the almond, is the area inside the great ring road, the motorway called M30, like the periphery in Paris. It's very similar. But the story of Madrid can be summarized in this comic of Felix Price in the 80s. No? And the city like an egg. The city center is really like the boiled egg. The city, the Madrid in the 19 and half last century was like this fright, but now the current city, the Madrid in the next cycle is a scrambled egg. It's less clear in its form, into urban form, is answer to another very different problems than the former stage of the city. And my thesis is very simple and clear. The conventional urban planning oriented to regulation is the THIAM planning, the Athens chart planning, still life in the urban regulation in many countries, is not enough to tackle the new challenges in social, environmental, and also, of course, urban problems. You can see the comparison of the sizes of the Manhattan, Madrid, and Madrid is more or less like Manhattan, but the city center of Madrid. The whole region, like Manhattan and the boroughs and also great areas in New Jersey, is a much greater area, much greater city. It's very interesting to see that the city center of Madrid, the population is relatively the same along nearly one cycle. From the 40s, just before the Civil War in Spain, that was very important, like the Second World War in the rest of Europe, until now, we have 1 million of inhabitants, very few. And this is more or less the number of inhabitants in Barcelona. But Madrid includes in the municipality many other Asian villages now transfer into quarters, into districts around this area. Let's see some keys of the city, of the shape of the city. Just the starting of the city is beside the river Manzanares. Is a very small river, but was important, and just the first foundation of the city were a castle in the Middle Age. In this picture, you see the city in the 17th century was closed without walls. It's very interesting because the topography were the natural defenses of the city. You see in this shape, you can identify, if you visit Madrid, the river. Now, one of the most interesting projects in Madrid is the recovery of the river. The limits of the city over the river, the Royal Palace, and the Plaza Mayor and Puerta del Sol. You see here this trail from the Royal Palace, the transformation of this square open to the Royal Palace in the 19th century, and from the Royal Palace to the Parque del Retiro, and from this one part to the other of the city, we have Puerta del Sol, and over there, la Plaza Mayor and Puerta del Sol. The shape of these two spaces is exactly the same. Now the building's construction has been transformed, but in the case of the Puerta del Sol, was a very French project in which you can recognize nowadays perfectly, because you have just in the opposite of the square, the Apple Store, no, in Madrid, but over the same old building that remain from just the foundation, the beginning of the place. As a result of the idea of a very close city, the density of the inner city is great. And this is a problem because we now promote density, a healthy density. But in the case of Madrid, this was a very serious problem because behind these beautiful facades, we have, let's see these two pictures. The first one is from the 30s in the 19th century. And the second one was in the 80s. And the standard of housing was very low, was behind these facades, was hidden a very dark world, unhealthy. Were the doctors, not the architects, the first to be concerned with this problem and to compare the mortality in the different quarters of the city. And as you can imagine, in these areas, in these quarters in the south of the city center, the mortality was much greater. There was a relation between the quality of housing and mortality, and also a relation between the wealthy, the rent, the level of the social level of the people, and the mortality. Let's remember these pictures of just the beginning of the 20th century, and still in the 30s and 40s, the problem of the unhealthy housing overall with the consumption, in Spanish tuberculosis. I think in English is consumption, the name of the sick, was connected, extremely close connected with the bad housing, bad standard housing. And this was the reason, like Beatriz Colomina described so well in her book, X-ray Architecture, just the starting of the new vision of the architecture connected with health and the standard and the typology of the sanatorium. Nowadays, before the lockdown, the problem of the unhealthy and understandard housing is now on the focus, and this main idea, and this newspaper, the main newspaper in Madrid, remember the story of many people who lives in understandard housing, and this was not so important because we live so much on the streets, in the travel, in the work, we travel so much, and the standard of our living is not so important. But suddenly, this obligation to be confined inside the city, the standard, put the focus that the problem of we still remain in Madrid with several thousand of understandard houses inside the city center, and the 5 worst flats, apartments to pass the COVID, the lockdown. Another highlight in the story of Madrid was the enlarge of the city in the 19th century. It's interesting that Spanish were founded new towns in Latin America during the times of the colonia, always with the same structure, the grid. But in the Spanish cities, like in the ancient Rome, there was no grid. The first grid in Madrid was in the 19th century, in the middle of the 19th century, and was this plan in red, surrounded the core of the city center. You see the Royal Palace, the Puerta del Sol, Plaza Mayor. Here is the Park of Retiro Park, is the Museo del Prado, over the ruins of the older Royal Palace for summer. This was the Winter Palace, like in St. Petersburg, and the Royal Palace for the summer. Sorry. And this was the way in which this new city was built during several decades. This picture is from the 30s, in the last century, and you can see how what was the image of this city? Very close to Paris and Vienna, in the line of the great urban design in Europe in that time. Nowadays, this area is perfectly recognized because the layout, the grid is so regular and the site is so regular. This is a very short version of the larger enlargement of Barcelona, the Ildefonso-Cerdà, which is a great character in the story of the urban planning. But in Madrid also worked Ildefonso-Cerdà as a consultant of the municipality and the Ministry of Public Works, who was in charge to develop this ensanche. These areas are very interesting because are a very clear city with a clear grid and a mixed use, because the way in which this enlargement of the city was made allow at the beginning overall the mix of social classes and also the mix of different uses. But some of the ideas, the original ideas of the ensanche, were lost along the time. For instance, to keep a green core, a green heart inside the blocks. You see, in the most of the blocks, the free space is occupied by a garage, shopping, workshops, and so on. Another highlight, Madrid was close and very dense at the beginning, a new enlargement in the 19th century, and in the 20th century, in the last century, just 100 years ago, appeared the great idea for the future of the city, that was not go on with another ring, larger and surrounding the ensanche, like the ensanche were a ring along the old city. Just was created a new idea, a new pattern, a new project, who was to enlarge the city directly to the north. And what's very interesting, because every step, in the story of the city, is important to understand the next and the next and the next. And it was very important in the 18th century, create in this area a new boulevard for walking, for pedestrian, Paseo del Prado, who was enriched with museums and other facilities of that time of the Enlightenment century. For instance, a new museum of natural sciences, now the Museo del Prado, a new botanical garden, a new astronomical observatory, and so always around this park and always around this area. And this create a new address, a new direction for the future development of the city, and this was the Castellana. And so Madrid found in this moment a new directive of growth, a new pattern, and perhaps Madrid should be a very scrambled out not in the periphery, but overall inside the inner core of the metropolis, without this big street. Now the street is Paseo de la Castellana, is the main street in the city. It's like in Barcelona, Diagonal, Perhaps it's not the comparison with Champs-Élysées is not fair, because just Champs-Élysées is much is older and much important for the story of the whole Paris. But the result is very similar. It creates a new direction, and the new upper class quarters should be in the north, not in the west, like in at the beginning of the enlargement of the city, but in the north. But the final highlight is the creation of the metropolitan expansion of the city, and the result was the transformation of the motorway grid from the 60s, 17th and 1890s, in which we create a so dense grid, in this case not the streets but motorways, but could finally low colonize, low extend the city in their surroundings, creating with the creation of a real metropolitan area. The result, we have lights and shadows. The promise of a green city finally result in this. The modern movement and the rational architecture finally create these surroundings in the first crown, the first ring of the metropolitan area, in which the landscape, the green landscape, finally achieved was that. No? If you see, if you were found to cinema, the films, the movies of many of the neorealistic movement in Italy, no? Vittorio De Sica, Pasolini, Visconti, many others. The landscape of Rome, Milano, Napoli, many of the main Italian cities were very, very similar to that. This was not our best example of the Mediterranean city, so in fashion, no? But this was the relation. And the childhood for many adults in Madrid nowadays was very similar to that. Just in the 60s, just in the beginning of the 70s, the building, the housing were built, but the streets, the open space, the parks, the facilities, schools, parks, etc., were completely unfinished or completely absent of the map and of the environment. There was in Spain a movement of city garden, but from the 30s of the last century. But the real city around the north of the metropolitan area was this sort of a garden city, more close to the sprawl, more close to the Anglo-Saxon suburb. So present in Madrid, associated to the upper class in the case of Madrid. So we have this landscape in the south, and from the 80s, this landscape in the north. In this case, the problems are very similar of them. Many American cities, this cartoon, no, from the New Yorker many years ago. No? So the real problems of the metropolitan area, we have how to achieve a balance between north and south. We have the problem on how to enrich the urban landscape overall in the south, in the low income quarters in the south of the city and in the south of the metropolitan area, and how to create city, real city, not sprawl and shopping centers in the north and west. And you see in comparison the urban form of these different steps of the city. The first is the old town, the enlargement of the growth of the city in the 19th century, the blocks, the rational blocks, private and from public housing, like in New York. Are very different, the typologies and the class and the sort of communitary spaces in one promotion and the other. This is the new extension of the city in the 80s and the new sprawl around the north and west of the metropolitan area. This sprawl is always understood together with big so-called cities. This is the Movistar city. Are called usually cities. They are Telefonica district in this case, or the transformation of a former industrial area in the north of the city in this new bank headquarters of the Bank of Bilbao with Hurtado de Muron. But always the structure is very similar. In this case, remains a castle because it's isolated between motorways without any relation with the surroundings. Is a sort of autist, the way to create new spaces, without connections, without the characters of the traditional and Mediterranean city of Madrid. So is the opposite in between the city center, and we are going to speak overall about the city center in the next minutes. But this is very important to keep in your mind, because this city is very similar to other cities in which, like Paris and many others, in which you have a great leap between the core of the city and the surroundings, in which the motorways, the cars, and the long distances are the kings. This is the new growth surrounding the part of Madrid and this new landscape, because the new landscape, because of the crisis, of the economic crisis, many of these developments stop without transition, and now are renewing the works, but the result was really strong, because this castle in the desert. Finally, some ideas of this Proyecto de Madrid Centro. This is the core of the city. You remember the first slide. This is a very conventional develop from a vision of the future of this area. We create the structure and identify many projects, and some of them are now in progress. I try to pass very quickly with this idea. The most interesting is there is a social contradiction, opposition between the north and the south. For instance, the unemployment rate by neighborhoods. No, you see this, but the whole of the city center is in the good side of the problem, and then the worst quarters and neighborhoods are in the southeast in this area. If you see and compare the size of the homes and the level of incomes in these two slides are the correlation, the parallel is exact. As much you earn, the better is your home, and many other parameters like health and many others are also connected with the level of incomes. Look in this picture, yet inside the city center, the increasing of the prices in the last years, just in the city center, and nothing in the surroundings, and the Airbnb, just following the areas of more prestigious with more touristic and visitor potential, but also as a motor of the increasing of prices in real estate. Well, the problem of the deterioration in the housing stock, I have talked about that. But we'll talk a little bit about the creative diversity and the cultural facilities in the city of Madrid. We are a very specific and interesting field to remark. Well, the objectives of this plan were create a new culture, not only new spaces, new culture in people, based in a new identity and a certain create identity, because the problem is many Madrilenians doesn't feel themselves as part of something greater. They came from many parts of the country, and now they came from many countries of the world. 15% of the population are foreigners at that moment without the nationality, and this sense are very similar to New York, but in a very, very, very small scale in all the parameters. And we promote a new urbanism based in to put in value the best we have in the city center, the streets, the open space, the public space, but also consider the value of the structure, the value of the infrastructure and facilities of this city center as economic assets to take into account in this sense of circular economy, and overall create a greater social cohesion. Without social cohesion, all the efforts in the different areas fall, because in a city with in a divided city with contradiction and insecurity and safe feeling in the population can succeed the economic and social purposes we try to get. This is very, very important also. And this new citizens is based in the idea of diversity. It's not in the uniformity, but overall in the idea of to integrate, to consider, to put in value the diversity, to promote a citizenship culture of the complexity. This is the idea of we sometimes talk about the Madrid mosaic to build the identity, addressing differences in a complex city. But also don't let nobody behind, and this is very important because one of the best qualities of Madrid is a very safe city. You can walk in the night before the lockdown. You can enjoy the gardens at all time, in the night, in the day. You can you can feel some sort of solidarity, but this is very, very different to keep and needs needs a certain effort in create a common culture in this sense. This picture, this celebration, an event of the Ecuadorian community in Madrid, or this is the Park of the Retiro, in which you can identify 7 or this is not amazing for living or visiting or having born in New York, but it's very important in a city overall based in a very close community, original community, and now characterized with a great diversity. We must assimilate. This new urbanism try to overall transform the view of the urban planning from the extension of the city to the transformation and recycling of the existing city. We try overall to put into value, to be proud of this city center. And the strategies, new planning, overall, with the idea, perhaps you have been heard of this idea in Barcelona, de la super manzanas, the super quarters, to create a new core of spaces inside the city without passing through traffic from outside. Streets and areas and neighborhoods overall devoted, oriented to the inhabitants, to the neighbors of these areas. Innovation spaces, cultural promotion, and new mobility. Let's see quickly, because we have no much time. This new planning is based in this idea of consider the street and the public space, not the car, the main link between people. And we create, and you can see perhaps in this picture, in green are the streets that can be only residents pass through traffic. And in black, in white, the main streets we connect with public transit and also pass through traffic, private pass through traffic, car traffic, connecting the different parts of the city. The result of this idea is amazing. Now, 60% of the streets, of the space of the streets, is asphalt. In the next project, just dividing, in this case, the streets for cars and public transit are in the perimeter, and inside are only for residents. The result is that only this 27% of the streets are overall for traffic, and 73% or more are streets for residents. This not means, as you know well, no cars, no, but cars at a very low speed, very, very low, 15, 20%, 20 kilometers per hour of the owners and residents in these areas. We achieve very easily, very, very easily, and this was created before the 15-minute city, famous from the case of Paris. And you see, we have from the core of this super quarter, we have the main metro stations 6 minutes, 10 minutes, and the main bus stations, stops at 3 or 5 minutes. Is very easy. We must achieve also the mixed use inside these quarters. It's not enough to control the traffic, the cars. It's necessary to promote the shopping, the local shopping, and many the larger variety of possible uses. And this is against the rules of the planning now in Madrid, who specialize areas for offices, areas for shopping, areas for housing, areas for facilities and equipments. This is an image of the result of it. Is now just beginning very, very slowly, because the municipality of Madrid is very afraid of the reaction of the neighbors, and develop this project with a very, very slow motion. The new mobility is overall how to achieve, how to surpass the captive car mobility. Madrid have achieved very experiences, but overall the car is still the king of the street. But look at this figure. It's very interesting, because this is the evolution of driving license holders in Spain, no? And the millennium, the new millennium generation, is not car friend. They have not license to have or to drive a car. This means that the habits of and expectations of the people have changed more than the thoughts and ideas of the planners and politicians and rulers and decision makers. This new mobility in the case of Madrid is very easy, because we have a very close network of big streets. We have a great metro, and we have the best possibilities to extend with electric public buses the short distances, the gap of the last 500 meters. Another interesting strategy is the urban landscape. We summarize this strategy in green in the city, which now is a very common concept. Some years ago was really new in the case of Madrid, and we try to take advantage of the existing green areas to put in value these parks, and some of them are very famous, but another are with a very short use. Use also this idea of the resident streets to create corridors that connect these areas. And we have a very interesting project in a bigger scale in Paseo del Prado. In this case, the municipality tried with the project of Álvaro Siza, you know, the Pritzker Prize from Portugal, no? The idea of the founders of the Paseo del Prado in the 18th century. This was created like a boulevard in the sense of Paris, in following this idea, was transformed into a quarter, into a neighborhood around the museum and some church and convent of Salesas and many Jerónimos and many other important places. But finally, now is a greater bunch of big and beautiful buildings, but over overused by the cars, because the Castellana is one of the main access north-south in the city. And the idea of Álvaro Siza was to transform this access and now again into a boulevard, to keep the transit north-south, but in a very, very reduced scale. Was also important, if you visit Madrid, the enlarge of the Prado Museum, the Rafael Moneo. Large is the convent of Jerónimos. Another project you are going to see, or perhaps you have heard from the authors, is the transformation of the recovery of the river. The river was a motorway, and was just the beginning, the first step in the founding of Madrid, a river around a castle over a river. The new motorway, you know, is underground, and now over the surface has been created this park. Only remember that this idea is part of just starting from the new lineal park of the Rio Manzanares. We create with like a collar of different pearls, connections east, west, and north, south in Madrid. The streets and the public space is now on the focus in the city because the pandemic. We recover the pleasure to walk, the pleasure to meet people, because we live in these very, very sad images. But the problem is the new uses of the public space are overcrowded, are not well planned. Sportmen, elder people, children are together in mix, probably in conflict. Was necessary to. This is just in the beginning of the open to the public spaces without cars, and just in the starting of the COVID and the pandemic. And we try to create another priority, pedestrian priority in the city, east-west. And finally, because I have no time, it's very, very important to consider culture, and in New York this is evident, of course, like a part of the urban transformation strategy. Culture is so strong, so the potencies, the capacities of culture to transform people and spaces and rediscover and recover areas in the city, that in the case of Madrid, we identify the hot places in the city, and we try to create access, create trails, create corridors connecting these different cultural spaces. In this case, connecting the Royal Palace in the west, the Retiro in the east, with Atocha, and we have here Museo del Prado, Thyssen, Museo de Arte Contemporáneo, with Guernica, de Picasso, and over there we have another very important cultural facilities. Here is the enlargement of the Mother Museum. In this case was is a French architect. Well, I can't remember in the moment, but the Nouvelle, the new foundation of a bank made by the Hertog de Mougon, and overall the recovery of a slaughterhouse in Madrid, in the south, Matadero is called, now transformed in one of the most interesting spaces and more creative and stimulant spaces in the city. Here are some of the inner spaces in these pavilions, with a very soft rehabilitation. Perhaps is the word. And well, we can stop here because finally we want to mention that also it's very important to work not only in the public space, not only around the traffic or facilities or big equipments, but also in the housing, in the extension of the city, no? And the transform rehabilitation into recycling, and to understand the idea of recovery like a circular economy are very important also in Madrid. And now the most of the interventions, architectural intervention in the city center, are transformations of old buildings in a new life. No? This is also very, very important. And this is the last step and the last brick in this idea. No? Well, I can stop here. Finally, I have used all my slot in this presentation, but perhaps understand it like an invitation to visit these places, to visit, to understand the scale, to walk the streets, to enjoy the meals, the cooking, to visit and not only the museums, but the cultural centers and the livable spaces in which many people in Madrid is now working in the city. Well, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Oh, it's for us to thank you. It was an incredible presentation. I think I know Madrid now almost better than I know New York. And while you were talking, I was looking at things that came out of your presentation, like age disparities. You had mentioned before we started that median age in Latin America, in Lima, for example, is much younger than Madrid. And it is. I mean, average age in Madrid is something like 42 years. And in Lima, the average age is 22.3. And that's older than the national average. New York is closer to Madrid, 37, but older than Chicago and Washington, more like 33 or 34. Barcelona was 44, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't want to keep comparing Barcelona and Madrid, but cities have features that seem to be so common that they could learn from each other in the interventions, whether it's the super blocks that you were mentioning in Barcelona. I found incredible the simplicity of just making the smaller streets smart streets, green streets, residents only, and keeping through traffic to the major thoroughfares. That would be relatively easy to do in New York. Shared streets with more bike lanes. Yesterday, Monsieur Zambrano was talking about how few bike lanes there are in the center right now, that all the bike lanes, and there are many, are on the periphery, and they're recreational rather than ways of getting to work or to school. So I don't know, I think a common theme in all of the talks that we've heard so far, and especially now and here with yours, was connectivity, was being able to overcome disparities, socioeconomic, geographic. I'm still not sure historically why the North and South were so economically disparate. I understand the difference between east of London and west of London, but
like in Paris, you know, so yes.
But the idea of connectivities and using even using the pandemic as a accelerator for making urban changes that wouldn't otherwise be able to be done as quickly, especially in the use of public space, and certainly the streets, but beyond that. And all that came together with a plan that's glorious. I'm dismayed that it's going slowly. I could understand perhaps why, but the idea of using the center as something that is a unifier is something that New Yorkers could learn from. You know, I'm from Brooklyn. Many people in Brooklyn don't go to Manhattan. They call that the city, you know, and it's even worse in the other four boroughs, the other three boroughs. So I don't know. I wish there was more time for discussion. We kind of have paired presentations almost by accident, but your conclusion in talking about the importance of housing and your starting point in talking about the connection between historically substandard housing and health rates and other socioeconomic factors, you know, may or may not lead into the presentation coming up by Maria and César. We'll be talking about housing and health, I expect.
Nice to see you, Professor Ezquiaga.
No,
Thank you both.
I'm so sorry, Maria.
No. Never mind.
So
I was enjoying the lecture.
Jose Maria, if you want to linger for the rest of our next hour, feel free to do so. But I'd like to welcome María Hurtado de Mendoza, César Jiménez, the Tejada. It's a pleasure to see you both here. Thank you. And you know, our format is very simple, but we don't necessarily always adhere to it, which is to say, we'll have images to instigate discussion. If there's time for discussion, fine. But it also, as you said, Jose, it's a way of instigating the desire to be there. I was telling my son that after these 3 days, I you know, regardless of what we're paying or not paying, I have to get to Madrid very soon because there's so much going on, and so much to see. So thank you again, Jose. Feniowski had to leave for a meeting. He asked me to apologize for his not saying goodbye in person, and also to you, Maria and César, for not being here for yours. But Maria, if you want to share your screen, if there's a presentation.
Yes.
All of the students have received, as I said before, biographical and firm informational link to the website. So I'm going to not do long introductions on
No need.
theory.
And also, they
there.
can go to our website very quickly.
Yeah.
And, you know, we architects, we prefer images. So,
right. But,
right.
You know, but by way of introduction, to personalize it a little bit, you know, I mentioned Jose in passing that we taught together very briefly at NJIT. I'm far from being an academic. I'm backed into it, but it was one of the most pleasurable experiences of my life because we didn't really know each other very well. And I remember the talk that you gave about your work, your firm's work at the Center for Architecture subsequently, particularly in regard to an anecdote that I continually use to talk about the competition scheme. Forgive me for saying it out loud, but the students haven't heard it, that many of your projects are come to the firm through winning competitions. But on average, you win only 1 in 10 competitions, or at least that's what you said, you know, several years ago. Maybe the number has gone up, maybe it's gone down. And you said that you were certain you were going to win the next project because you had just lost competitions for 9 in a row. And I thought, what a great optimistic way of looking at the next one. In any case, the floor is yours. I'll stop there, and we have as much of the next hour as you want to take. And thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. And Feniowski, although we are not meeting him today, I'm really willing to meet him because I've never met him, and I don't know. But you can say hello for me and for César.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So we were so intrigued, you know, with your invitation because we have never explained our work as being related to Madrid. And then, you know, we started looking, you know, putting together the projects, and we realized that we've worked in Madrid quite a lot, and with some interesting experiences, and you know, we like to think that we are putting our little grain, right? Like to scale up the quality of the public architecture. Oh, sorry. We are, so these are the dots that we're going to talk about. These are the 5 projects we've
Maria,
What?
Maria, excuse me. I think you have to share the screen. You cannot see it.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was.
You should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try again. Compartir pantalla. Iniciar transmisión.
There we go.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we started like this almost, all the buildings that we're going to show today were done with José María, my brother, as partner. And also Albert Ruiz is ¿cómo se dice? Associate architect of the, yes, associate architect of the firm. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to start by showing you, I heard that you were talking about north and south. ¿Qué no pasa esto? ¿Qué le pasa ahora? Okay. I heard that you were talking about north and south, and why is that, north is richer and south is more like working class neighborhoods. And it's quite true. So the first 3 projects, which are the 3 dots in the southern part of the image, are clinics. And these are clinics, public, won in a public competition, and they are, the owner is the mayor. I mean, the city hall. So these are very peculiar. It was a very peculiar competition because, sorry, I need to start, to control like my boards. What is happening here? Okay. Great. But before we go to talk about the clinics, I think there's something important that we can explain about our practice, because, well, not all the architectural practices have the same aims or desires. So we are a spatial practice, meaning that the ultimate goal of our work is the conception and the construction of architectural space. And I want to underline the word space as the most important thing in our architectural research. We do have the will to build architecture, and we are interested in the journey between conceptual thinking and the spatial consequences in the built environment. So whatever it is that you think on paper, how is it going to become in the 3D world? And we enjoy these opportunities, for example, this lecture, to to share these interests with students and with colleagues, because as I said, not everybody approaches the profession from the same side. And today we will put the emphasis in the relationship between abstraction and concretion, right? This is something that we like to say, talking about Aristotle. Thinkers talk about why science, by definition, is abstract, because it aspires to the generality of a law, a relationship, or a concept, and not the uniqueness of an existence. But what happens with architecture? Because architecture in its particular way of thinking, is moving constantly between general and singular, between abstract and concrete. For example, we can talk about, if we want to think what, if we want to be sure that you understand what abstract or conceptual is, we can say endless curved space. And that is an idea. Then we can go and see, for example, the U House by Toyo Ito or the Campomanes Street in the center of Madrid. They are two very different realities, which nevertheless respond perfectly well to the concept of endless curved space, which is, which are those spaces where when you enter the space, you don't see the end. So there is this sense of infinity. We also like to talk about method. So we can even say that a part of our design research is on method, with an even closer connection with our interest in the relationship between order and disorder and in the construction of architectural space. It has to do with how we do architecture and what is the support for our thinking during that process. Let's see if we succeed in giving you a glimpse of our thinking, of our architectural thinking. And this is a very good example of method. And these are, believe it or not, the unfolded elevations of the clinics that we are about to see. Here, the method could be named something like a case of iterations. You probably know, or maybe not, but now you will, that Le Corbusier liked to call this the patient search. Like he was searching and searching. So he was rehearsing the same idea back and forth to arrive to calibrate the kind of space he wanted to build. So this is a script. Maybe we should say it's like the storyboard of the trilogy of clinics that we are about to show you. However, you probably wonder why 5 drawings if it's a trilogy, right? Like if there are 3 buildings, and you're gonna understand that, but also it's a provocation for when we show our work, because we kind of enjoy these estrangement in the world, right? Like how 5 is 3, or how. So there was Haydak talking about the inequations that we admire very much, and for example, he used to say 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, as if it's more than 2. Well, we do enjoy those paradoxes, and maybe you will see in a minute if all that I'm saying has to do with our architecture or not, but hopefully yes. So 3x1 is the story of how is that we have built 3 times the same building, the very exact building. And they do have the same client, which is the City Hall, the same budget, the same program, which is a clinic, but only 3 different sites. And our answer to those initial conditions was to work with the idea of placeless building. A great sense of autonomy was required, either formal and functional and even conceptual, to allow the building develop no matter where. This is an early model of the roof seen from below. This is the competition model, actually done by César very late at night. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And showing the projection expression in terms of form, like a continuum with two types of exceptions, by perforation and hollowing. It is a good opportunity to explore the notion of the fifth facade as well, because this project is all about the roof. There are many surrounding tall buildings from which the roof can be very visible. They are not represented here, but you will see them in a minute. And in trying to conceptualize the project, or the competition entry, we enjoyed naming it as a box, right? But it's a very specific one, which the light comes only and only from above. Let's see how that happens. The roof plane behaves as a sensitive membrane. This is the floor plan for these trilogy healthcare centers. As I said, the three buildings have the exact same floor plan, same dimensions, same everything. The program is disposed extensively on a single ground and understood as field condition. There is an isotropic disposition of rooms and courtyards, private and public spaces in a loose grid. There are three main conditions that arise from that disposition. So there is the inner space in orange, the green, that is the perimeter of the outer shell, in green I said, and then the purple are the voids and volumes in the shell. So as you see, all the light comes from above. This shell is a hermetic and enclosed box to the exterior, but then encloses the open and light space of the interior to emphasize its value. So when you see the building from outside, you think it's going to be very dark. But then here, when we superimpose the public space in continuity, you see that all the courtyards, or almost all the courtyards of the building, are lighting that public space. And that becomes a non-stop visual continuity across interiors and courtyards, and provides space enlargement. So public space is extensive and no hierarchical. And as an opposition, in this compact geometry, this green shell, which is the compact geometry, and it does have a perimeter, but it doesn't really matter the shape of that perimeter, right? Do you see that it's like almost a square, but not exactly, and with one part is larger than the other, and it doesn't matter. So this project is not about the shape, or it's not about the form that the building has. Also, there's, for us, no harm in admitting that the clinic project was not thought from the beginning in terms of gravity, like in structural gravity, but in its spatiality, as I said. Good proof is that is the fact that two different structural solutions were used for the three individuals. So the two first, like San Blas and Ucera, were concrete load-bearing walls, while the right one, Villaverde, has a steel frame. And it's very peculiar because one could almost say that it's a space without a structure, in the sense that it does not manifest its presence. And yet many of the formal and material questions answer to that structure. If we center, I mean, if we start looking closer to San Blas, which is the first one that we built, we see that the solid and heavy facade is conceived as a windowless mass, right? Remember that we were talking about skylight only. The absence of hollows in the vertical walls of the exterior enclosure causes the relationship between the interior and the exterior of the building to occur vertically, almost with the sky above.
Maria, hold on a second. I think your slide is not okay now.
Yeah, this was the one that I was talking about. This is the one in which we have to realize that power relationship with the above. Thank you, César. And remember, we were saying, what is the connection between conceptual thinking in architecture and the concrete? So here we have the concrete. The idea of heaviness is present, of course, but it's also reinforced in the construction by the rough texture formed by the horizontal wood planks in the concrete formwork. And this was quite interesting because these very simple drawings are the elevations for the DCs, right? Like the CDs, construction documents. There was nothing else to draw. Well, yes, there was. Actually, we arrived to the construction site and we met a fantastic guy that had been doing concrete forever, all his life, and we learned a lot from him. And for example, something that interested us at that point was to think of how to delete the scars that construction produces, right? When you're pouring concrete, every time you stop for the day, then you have a scar. So we were working very hard in this idea of the scarless merger. So thinking of whatever number of different components or parts a project might have, we tend to erase their independency in favor of the wholeness. And that is probably why we work a lot with unfolding drawings or developments like this, to bring the idea of continuous wrapping or skin. The construction system was based on the use of standard formworks. So we decided to use only one panel size and to module the whole building. And of course, when you try to module something that wasn't thought modulated, this is what happens, that there are parts where it doesn't match. And another thing that was important for us, for example, was to align panel joints with the elevation cutouts, so we wouldn't have uncompleted pieces or pieces with a bite. And then we added wood texture with wood planks for the no-matching parts. We decided some adjustments, trying to hide differences by not placing them in the cutout points, and adding the small parts to the regular. So it's better to have a piece that's slightly bigger. And because you know what happens, that once it's built, you don't see the difference. And this brings us probably to another idea we like, which is the non-standard that appears when varying from the usual. So it doesn't matter from where you start. You can start with the most simple thing, that if you go away from what everybody does, what is the usual. Then you're arriving to, this, as César will talk about this later again, but this kind of estrangement that produces seeing something that is built in a slightly different way than it usually does. Okay, and this is how it came, the concrete. We were very happy, we have to admit. The outcome was fabulous, and we can think, like after a while, when the building is in use and everything has been like kind of digested, we like to think that this skin process talks about the identity of the building, right? It becomes its personality in a way, or represents who, what it is. But we were talking about the luminous inside, and this is what happens inside. Courtyards bring indeed the light inside the building and help to create this spacious and luminous interior. The transparency and mirroring qualities of the glass also create multiple visions by reflected symmetry. And the vertical walls of the blue tiles in the courtyards do also have reflective qualities, as you see here, and they bring not only the lights but the sky inside. They reflect the las nubes.
Cloud.
Clouds, thank you. And another interesting question here, talking about space, is that the corridor vanishes in a certain way. It's no longer that traditional linear connection structure, because the alternating arrangement of the empty spaces of the courtyards and also the public waiting areas, which is where you sit for waiting to be called by the doctor or the nurse, and it does have, as a result, an interesting equilibrium between front and side, right? Like it's a very peculiar corridor. And also the dark blue in the patios creates a vertical relationship and fixes their placement in space. When you are in this kind of homogeneous bubble of light, the dark blue allows you to almost count courtyard if you wish. And these courtyards are equal but also different. There are no identical patios amongst the 14 of the clinic due to material and structural reasons that don't belong entirely to subjectivity. So the rules are, I don't know if you're gonna be able to follow this, but only load-bearing walls and the outer shell is concrete, the rest is not. So if we had to do like an opaque wall that was not load-bearing, then it was ceramic. And we let each patio to be however it needed to be according to that rule. So this is like a decision-making strategy based in process that is open to surprises and which is not foreseen. It's kind of a question of freedom in syntaxis, or syntaxis freedom or something like that. And as we said before, the relationship with the exterior is 100% vertical. And through the voids, we link to the roof. Oh, not yet, sorry. These pictures are interesting. They belong to the 10th anniversary of the clinic. And and we were crying of joy to see how the building had become, right? Because the pictures we were showing at the beginning seem, why there is no people, but there are many. And actually the spaces demonstrate that they are so flexible that could be used in very different ways, and which makes them very easy to appropriate. Everybody can go and decide, oh, I'm going to sit here. And they are always right, because you can sit wherever you want. Here is when I said we were going to the roof, and maybe now you are able to understand what happens. On one hand, these volumes containing double height spaces and service areas appear on the roof, but also you can see the tall housing buildings belonging to, I don't know, probably the 70s of in a working neighborhood, and our desire to provide them like a, almost like a picture instead of a weird roof full of machines. The blue tiles are arranged in lines with a third of a piece displacement from the one below. So we don't have so much of the static sense of a grid, but a texture surface that expand. This is something that, these expansive textures, I know we are in Madrid, your trip is in Madrid, but if you ever have the opportunity to go to Granada, please visit La Alhambra and enjoy this idea of the expansive tiling, because that was indeed the reason for their design, to make the surfaces endless. And now we're going to see how different it is when the skin of the building is enclosure and structure at the same time, like here, right? Like the concrete skin is also the enclosure of the building. Because we are now going to visit Usera, which is the second building that we built. And here, this is just a thin and golden layer that we put to hide what cannot be shown. And maybe why not with a little extravagance. You can understand it in a minute. But for example, you will see in the bottom of the building, in the base, that it was supposed to be concrete, but we had to react against some problems. I'm going to concentrate more in the golden skin, which is what gives the identity to this building. I was telling that we built this building 3 times, right? And this time the outer shell of concrete is dressed with a metal skin. And this is expanded golden anodized aluminum with a cut pattern that repeats around 4 inches by 2. And this idea of cutting and joining has to do with, the Scarlet murder that we were saying before, right? We are interested in the way things need to be cut in pieces so they look complete once you join the pieces again. We started to solve this problem of cutting and joining issue of the golden skin. We worked initially with a spiral net formed by proportional rectangles. We love this net, but believe it or not, we have never been able to build it one day. And through the cutting out, and we thought of cutting out figures from the pattern like this, right? Like as if we were using stencils. Again, this idea of virtual expansion and not framing. And the truth is that we loved it, but with, and all the pieces were rectangular, but the execution seemed maybe too complex, if only to the eye, which is very important on the construction site. And we couldn't afford delays because this was the second chance that we had in life to finish this building. So, this is what we did. To maintain the idea of impenetrability of the facade, we work with two intentions. One, arrange different panel sizes in a way that they didn't build a grid. Combine different heights and widths in a way it was hard to know the number of floors of the building, and seeking for balance between horizontal and vertical, which is something that we are very interested as well. And then we also wanted to maintain the mesh texture to go over the paneling without interruptions in pattern. So one panel merges into the next and the next and next. And for doing so, we use the mathematical rule of greatest common divisor. There is only 3 groups of related dimensions, so we could have a free sequence of panels that align vertically only at certain moments, whenever they sum the same. So the medium equals 2 times the small, but there's these relationships that make them go independently and then align. And now when, in going inside, what can we say? You know the building already. However, this time, this helps us bring another question that has to do with our experience in the use of ceramics as a dressing, which is the spatial implications of the presence or absence of color in the project. In this case, the abstract and horizontal space that arises when merging the white of the patios with the interior. Maybe it's easier to see in the pictures. So remember how the blue was made the patios very present before, and here it's kind of hard to understand what is out and what is in, right? As for the trilogy, in this case, we think that it's possible to read the interior spaces as more horizontal, as we're saying, but also more abstract in comparison to the previous. And promise, the only difference is the color of the ceramic tiles. All the rest is exactly the same: floor, ceiling, walls, lighting, everything. The whiteness blurs the spatial understanding with a very subtle difference between the in and the out. The vertical relationship with the above is more diffuse, one may say. And the absence of frames translates also in lack of thickness in the golden envelope, and the showing off of how thin it is. So we were not trying to cover or protect the edges of the mesh. Okay, and the third, I have to start running because otherwise César is not gonna have time.
I know.
Okay.
Don't worry, keep going.
Third one, this is easier, Villaverde. The main difference with Villaverde is that it's very urban. Instead of being a pavilion in a park, this is a street alignment. So we had to do something to make the building more friendly to pedestrians, because otherwise it's like, you know, like really uncomfortable to walk in the street by a blank wall. And that is why the translucency of the glasses and well, you know, I think this picture speaks for itself. If you, for example, were remembering the golden mesh in a minute, right? And these are drawing same geometric patterns, but with a different proportion. And the inside this time, because we were using glass, translucent glass and polycarbonate, it's more diffuse, it's more like atmospheric. The image also represents for us the creative understanding of evidence-based design concepts, such as the desire of natural light and privacy. Because, you know, maybe just for finishing with these clinics, and so I can give time to César, I can say that we do advocate for synthetic thinking as the ability of architecture to solve at once many problems as possible, including the aesthetic ones. These are the interiors of these translucent Villaverde. And the difference that it makes when you're in the street and you can see lights through the skin, even more so from the neighbor buildings. And this I'm gonna pass. And now it's César's time.
Okay, thank you, Maria. The green dot is the next project location. In Madrid's north periphery is a private housing. So we could say that it's fussy about this image, isn't it? I mean, well, it will not work that way. Be patient, let's see what we could display from our field work first. Please don't think that the idea of fussiness will be represented by a certain image. It will operate as a more conceptual level, we hope. Starting from the beginning, this is one of the first models we did for the single family house project we did. Quite a large.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry, Maya. This is quite a large one, something around 5,000 square meters. The site is narrow and long, also sloped toward the south. Apart from a very generic intuition of how to deal with the slope, we introduce the hypothesis of turning upside down the usual configuration of the house. So the upper level would be a garden-like condition, and the program will be underneath, related to the lower level of the site always. Two different schemes superimpose one on top of the other. A longitudinal one based on spatial forking, and the one underneath based on a hand figure-like configuration. Maria?
Sí.
Yeah, sorry. The reason for the configuration arises to the project from the existing context. the long and narrow side that we want to emphasize and take advantage of, the slope from the entrance down that invited us to invert the usual configuration of a house by bringing the bedroom below instead of above. And this is the image that it's built, which is not even true, or maybe it is not for the neighbor perspective, because this house doesn't have a clear presence. As a result, a fracture mass ruled by the overall structural order and rhythm of the roof. Some other things considered are the growth against the slope, or permeable skins that thicken space boundaries. Talking about a revisited relationship between the thickness and density. The upper level is a daytime pavilion with a metal roof structure that goes all the way through in visual continuity. Concrete supporting walls and glass enclosure are the other two vertical elements, blurring the idea of interior and exterior. Continuity is sometimes physical, some others just visual. Rooms below are barrow-like, with nests opening in between them. As for the floor-plan solution, structure above comes the space in a single direction, transversal to movement in the upper daytime space, a regular striation of the plan on the x-axis that support the looser geometrical strategy in the y coordinate. Below penetration, fragment to the volume brings light deep inside the building mass. Let's see how it works. This is a daytime pavilion above the house, made of steel and glass. Long views through consecutive interior and exteriors, spatial sequencing in longitudinal continuity based on forking. Different layers of the enclosure play here their battle of interiority, exteriority, to be in, but out there, in, throughout, and so on. Details and geometry tied together by the repetitive pattern of the roof structure. A structural steel plate roof, 16-inch high and half an inch thick.
Ay, no pasa. Ahora.
There is a permeable skin following the same pattern of the reinforced concrete vertical lines. This is not only about the absence of frame. Supporting elements are secondary or intentionally hidden and as thin as possible. A permeable skin to soften transversal views, light and heat, thin layers that thicken space boundaries. Partially removable as if were the shutter are partial removable, as if we were wide opening the eyes. There is a precise definition of the skin. For that to happen, working hand by hand with the locksmith to achieve a smooth movement and millimetric refolding. In cross sections, we see the persistent spatial and physical continuity between interior, exterior, diffuse limits, a number of thin layers. That address thickness without density. The light thickness of the skin provide redundant circulation all the way through the plan. And so allows the skin to be inhabited. With the emphasis in the continuity inside, outside that I was just talking about. And the awareness of the below, providing extra lightness or some sort of anti-gravity perception of flotation. Here we see its longitudinal development and the bifurcation that also occurs vertically between levels. The only other material in the north facade is polycarbonate, hosting the interstitial space for circulation. And connect also with the car entrance through a huge translucent plastic sliding door. A house with no appearance sits on the ground seamlessly and find in that accommodation the main reason for the overall strategy. Here we are interested in the potential of divesting of things. What means for architecture the lack of something? There is a great book by the Spanish architect Federico Soriano, who loved the paradox. It is actually his PhD thesis entitled Without Thesis, or let's say thesisless. Its chapters are planeless, sectionless, detailless, and so on. Federico referred to them as soft resignation. So let's try to understand in our work this. We like to think of this project as a house with no appearance. It is a formless project in the sense that it is impossible getting any volumetric understanding as a spectator. Also, because of the camouflage of the permeable skin with the concrete and the level of abstraction. And this is the roof of the house, actually. Indeed, has no present, not even for on Google, the kind of camouflage we have been taken about. The pink dog.
¿Cómo vamos de tiempo? Rick?
I have 5 minutes and finish. If you
Okay.
consider
Take
we can
the
stop
5
here.
minutes. Please, this is fascinating. Please.
Okay.
Okay. All right. As I said, the pink dot is the next project location in Madrid's southeast periphery. It's a social housing block. In this case, the main issue is scarless, as in no clear defined scale, which paradoxically translated into scalar integration with context. The relationship between coexistence of the scale and scalar ambiguity try to establish the dialogue that occurs on the history of the city by the accumulation of different situations through time. In this case, urban housing becomes a reference building that assumed the role of qualifying the urban fabric once before qualified by other uses. We transform a given volume of a block into something different. In this, the exact same number of square feet, but with a larger silhouette, a kind of non-mimetic contextual approach. Over the horizon grid, windows are inserted, trying not to reveal the different floor levels. Program is not differentiated in the envelope either. So there is a certain ambiguity in scale. Big and small coexist beside what cannot be understood, not big, not small. Because it is true that size matters. Small, medium, large, extra large can coexist, have to coexist, I would say. We propose to think every project from the perspective of the body, the room, the building, and the neighborhood. We might see the building as the linkage of a tower and a block by a central plinth, but also as a free development of height, where balance between parts and the whole is somehow surprising, and the whole is sometimes more than the addition of part. Housing units, in this case, are interlaced in plan, and duplex in the plinth also in section. They have two versatile spaces, upstairs and downstairs. They cross in section facing opposite facade that are able to be used as living room and bedroom, or offices and working space. Either funny or not, your upstairs neighbor is also your downstairs neighbor. Secret law or disorder, or the distance that exists from intuition to the law of disorder, hidden behind an apparent randomness. On this structure, which support both unity and multiplicity, some projecting windows are added freely as distortion elements, giving more vibration to the image. But apart from that little freedom, law of disorder are here arranged by fire regulation, distance between windows of different floor, and to the staircase opening too. Also by the retired minimum level of lighting and ventilation depending on the room size and use, or the minimum height or opening to prevent from falling down. Floor height is divided into 4 equal parts. So windows can be single, which are always centered double in the upper or lower position, or triple, always with the same width. Another strategy here comes in this housing project from the floor plan geometry. It is based on the double symmetry of perpendicular axes, equivalent to a rotation. As in ambigram, with are the words that can be read equally upside down. We can spin the plan and obtain the same result. Let's go through ordinary and extraordinary. We try to enable the coexistence of the day-to-day situation, such as a regular house window, with the extraordinary of its placement, which gets rid of non-compositive schemes, collaborating with the idea of uniform volume. We try to enable the coexistence, the relationship between coexistence of scale and scalar ambiguity, try to establish the dialogue that occurs on the historic city by the accumulation of different situations throughout time. Also, the idea of urban housing as a reference building, unique, somehow iconic device that assumes the role of qualifying the urban fabric once before qualified by other uses. At a different scale, we use the material that seems to be out of context, unusual either by texture or size or pattern, abstract, but useful in preventing from deterioration and informing the way other uses are embedded. Basic ceramic tiles reflecting surrounding and blurring the presences. In the tower, the outer skin is a metal coat of thin scales set in horizontal bar or strips with a certain offset of displacement of the vertical joints that result on a spiral effect. Shadow lines are their own rhythm to the thing's materiality. In the interior, pavement, size, and tile parent work a similar way through displacement. Apartments are very small, so we use only one type of tile that works well for all the different uses and rooms. And it is small enough to make a consistent pattern, avoiding the presence of cut pieces. Let's see a time lapse of the tower construction process. It grew a floor per week, as you can see.
And now I have to exit this
The video.
thing.
Well, these are amazing projects. I wish we had more time. I have a...
This is only 2 minutes. Rick.
Thank you. Thank you. Great video.
This was it.
I really appreciate seeing these projects. I have so many questions, so many things we could discuss, and maybe we'll find a way of getting to Madrid and seeing things together and asking the questions then. I unfortunately have a dead stop now because of a call that's coming in
Sure.
right in any minute. But you know,
We'll
the
talk
one
some other
question-
time.
The one question that I was going to ask about the clinics in particular, because Maria, you started talking about the modules of the facade, at least of the concrete version, is there a culture of producing larger scale spatial modules, modular construction? Because the nature of the geometry could have been done beyond the panels, you know, and you weren't tied to one structural system. Some were load bearing, as you said, some were steel frame. Was there any consideration in doing it offsite?
No, and I mean, this is very interesting that you're asking it, because I started knowing about offsite construction in New York, right?
Yeah.
Like when with all these lectures in AIA and what is the architecture for, or how are they call these guys that do that? And I've been amazed by the offsite construction. Never heard of it in Spain.
Yeah, is it part of construction culture or economics or?
I think there's nobody has started doing it, or maybe they have, but not very successfully. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna figure. I mean, I'm gonna find out, because
Right.
you're right. For these small scale buildings, it's definitely a very good solution.
And even
saves-
for the regularity of social housing, you know, maybe it's a little bit more difficult for such an evocative and geometrically
house.
complex house.
Yeah.
But for social housing, you know, tautologically rather modular.
Yeah, and the clinics for sure.
Yeah. But incredible work. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time. And I, again, just wish we were all there.
Pleasure.
I'll give Feniaski your regards and extend his apologies. And let's try to get together in New York, if not Madrid. But
Okay.
Madrid
Yes.
would be my preference. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow.